What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatmas, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Michel Barrett, and we talk about analogies and how they can complement our facilitation toolbox. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you go to the show notes, scroll down, find the link to download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Michel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Miriam. It's great to be here.
I'm very much looking forward to exploring the topic of analogies and metaphors with you.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to chatting with you as well. As I got my background, my grounding in your work, I realized as I listened to your podcast that in addition to being a very good podcast host, you are obviously clearly a practicing facilitator, and your questions are always nuanced and subtle. Not to set you up, but I guess I just did. But I've been really looking forward to chatting, talking shop with a fellow facilitator. So thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I always ask the same question to kick off the conversation because I think it's always interesting and insightful to hear the story behind the guest. So when did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Oh, yeah, the origin story of my life's work, huh? So to just give you the briefest context, I started the first 10 years of my career, I was at Procter & Gamble, and then I spent about 10 years as a management consultant. And then for the last 15, I've been a facilitator. And I would say during my management consulting days, I began to do the thing that I later learned to be facilitation. And I think what drew me to it, Miriam, is that I never really felt comfortable as a management consultant to come in and give my clients the answer. I never really thought I was that smart, truthfully. I'm coming into people, they've managed their businesses for decades. Who am I to tell them what they should and shouldn't do? Which kind of runs afoul sometimes of what a management consultant is paid to do. So I realized without knowing what I was doing that if I structured my interactions with my clients more around asking them questions and creating kind of the flow of the conversation, that often brought as much value, from my perspective, even more value than me coming in and saying, I am the expert and the answer is 3. And then I really stumbled into some training around facilitation several years after I was doing that, just bootstrapping things. And I had this aha, like, this is a thing, right? This is a profession, and there's a body of knowledge. And I'd say it was then. But even then, I was doing it kind of with a little bit of training. And then I decided when I did my own thing that I should probably get a little more serious about what is the body of knowledge and how can I apply it. So that's a long answer to a short question. But yeah, it was, I was doing it well before I knew what I was doing. And it's interesting. Just this last week, I was chatting with somebody who's newer to our field, is debating going off and doing her own thing. And her origin story was almost identical. It was just, we just like, I'm doing something, not sure what, but I'm liking it. Yeah.
Funny, for me, it was similar. And I actually stumbled across the word of facilitator first time when I read Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering.
Yes.
And then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm a facilitator.
Yeah, it really is. And, the root of that is facile, right, is to make easy. And it's interesting to me because when we do our work well, we are, in fact, making it easier for our participants to get wherever they want to go. And I think it's a fascinating play on the word. But a lot of people, even when you tell them, like, yeah, I'm a facilitator, it's like, what? What?
Which is interesting, right? Because I think especially when we compare the consultant work and the facilitator, for many of the organizations who hire consultants, it would actually make more sense for them to have a facilitator because then the group owns the solution and will feel more enabled, empowered, and motivated to actually implement.
Yes. And I can remember, I will not acknowledge how many engagements I was on as a in 10 years as a management consultant where I walked off of doing great work, just poured my life into it. And I knew that was going on a shelf, never to be seen again. And boy, that's a hard thing to deal with. And I also think it's one of the things that makes facilitation so exciting, is that as part of our intention, right, to design the work, design the conversations, if our intention is to make sure that they own it and they drive it forward on the back end, can make a completely different session. And more important, I think, it's a much better experience for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can really lead to a transformation, to a deep transformation of the individual, the team, and the organization.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. It's a fun gig, isn't it? It's a fun, yeah. It's funny because as I was clicking off the chapters of my career, I had noticed that about every 10 years, I was just getting a little itchy to do something different. And now I'm 15 years into this, and I can't imagine doing anything else. Don't want to really. So maybe there's another chapter in this for me.
Let me know, but maybe we don't want to lose you in the community. I'm talking about chapters and you switching roles. I remember in our exploration call, you shared that at some point you were a massage therapist.
Was. Yes.
And we had a very intriguing conversation around that. So I would like you to share directly with the audience. What have you learned about facilitation, or where do you see the parallels between facilitation and being a massage therapist?
Yeah, that would not appear obvious on its face, would it? And actually, just a tiny little bit of context. I left my job as an account executive at a management consulting company, and honestly was just a little burned out, needed to take a sabbatical. Mm-hmm. So I became a full-time massage therapy student here in Georgia. 9 months full-time. I was a student again in my 40s, I guess it was my 40s. And halfway through that training, I got a random call, and I was on the IAF website as a certified professional facilitator at the time. And he cold called me and said, "Hey, I need a facilitator. Will you do it?" And I started to work both of these in parallel. And I was blown away, actually, by how much I could bring from one domain of my life into another. And I guess maybe maybe the first thing that I realized was when you study massage, it's very much a systems way of looking at things. And I remember one day I started playing with this analogy of the organization as organism, right? And begin to think about, how can I think about the clients I'm working with and their challenges like I would a massage client? And a couple things that really kind of jumped out to me was I'd learned, didn't realize it at the time, but in your body, the source of the dysfunction is often not the source of the pain, right? So for instance, like if your pecs are tight from sitting in front of a monitor all day, your pecs won't hurt, but your back will, because you're overstretching those muscles. And so like the thing that's getting in the way is not the back, it's the pecs, but no, you don't even notice that. So I began to bring that lens to work I was doing with my clients. And they would say, our problem is that we can't, like deliverables are in a mess. And you start to chain it back and realize that what it was maybe was something involved in the sales process, right? That set up the organization to feel the pain back in billing. And so, that's one example. Another one I saw that because this was a fun analogy for me. It was like, oh, there might be some legs here. I also realized as a massage therapist that if you have dysfunction that is not treated, let's say, for instance, that you've got pain in your foot, plantar fasciitis, if that's left untreated, then that can cause a chain of dysfunction. And you can literally have a really bad headache from the fact that your foot is not in alignment, right? So that was another great analogy for me as I began to chat with my clients and just see where things flowed. And so what that does is, get from a massage therapy standpoint, it's like you can treat symptoms all day long. People come in with symptoms because they don't know what the root cause is. But if you can step back, chain that dysfunction back to the source and treat the source, then the rest of this just unwinds itself. And to me, I thought that was just a really, really powerful analogy.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I can even imagine, so when I think of a patient walking in and talking about their pain, also you cannot just start doing stuff without explaining, or just, okay, lay down and you're going to work your body, and then you walk out healed. You first kind of need to create the space where the patient also feels in good hands, because if they cramp under your hands, then all the massaging also doesn't lead to any healing, right?
Mary, I think you just, in fact, landed the most significant analogy that I took out of that experience, is that, just like you've said, sounds like you've received body work before. If the environment isn't conducive, nothing good will happen, right? And I find so many facilitators that just go in and they've got their game plan, but they haven't thought about, where are the individuals? What kind of prep have we done? Literally, what kind of physical environment are we in? If we just show up with our deck or our Zoom meeting and expect that just follow my lead, yeah, that sometimes works, but more than not, it doesn't. And I find to spend the time thinking about the environment we're creating for the people, for the discussion, has an outsized impact on the results. And can I share one more? Because
yes, please.
Okay, so and one more that I learned when I was a student of massage. I remember an instructor walked in one day and said, I'm going to tell you all something that you may not believe, but it's true. Like, okay, you got our attention. And she says, look, as a massage therapist, you need to understand about your clients. You didn't break them, and it's not your job to fix them. Which was really, I thought I was going into this to heal people. And I realized pretty early on, it's like, no. As a therapist or a facilitator, I'm not healing anything. I'm creating an environment where the person on the table, they can heal themselves. And in a session, if we go in with that same perspective, it's like, my job is to bring as much as I can to create the environment. And that's everything we talked about, session design, prep. I want to create an environment where I can make it as easy for them to go where they want to go as they can. But it's not my job to come up with their answer. It's not my job to have them go through breakthrough, right? If they do, that's great. But I have also come to realize massage therapy clients and teams, they go as far as they will go, right? And sometimes it takes more than one session on a massage therapy table to really get rid of the dysfunction. And sometimes it takes more than one dip into a facilitator session to do the same thing for an organization.
Absolutely. And this brings to my mind the relevance of expectation management. Because as you said, okay, you didn't break them, so it's not your job to heal them. Wow, yes. Now that I think about it, of course, we need the self-healing power. But I can imagine that as much as patients would walk into the massage room and say, I have pain, you need to fix me. Mm-hmm. There are teams or clients calling you up saying, okay, we have team issues, come in, do your magic so that we have brilliant teamwork and a final decision at the end.
Yeah, I find that less knowledgeable clients on either side of this massage facilitation divide, the ones that are less knowledgeable about the work that is going to be done as a therapist or a facilitator, think that the job of the person they've hired is to fix them, heal them, make it all better. And I've had many conversations with clients where if, like one client asked me to write in the proposal that his team was going to create breakthrough ideas. And I laughed in his face, and he was a friend, so that helped. But I said, look, I don't own the breakthroughs. Your team owns the breakthroughs, right? I can't commit to that, nor would I want to. Because as soon as I start trying to drive to a point of view, trying to take you to a place in time instead of through your conversation, I am putting my thumb on the scale, right? And that's not what you want. If you want somebody to put their thumb on the scale of how you all think, hire a consultant, right? And in fact, bring them into the session if you'd like. But my job is not to provide the prescription. Yeah.
And I also wonder whether there is still misconception. It might be due to insecurities or also not being so familiar with the profession that they are massage therapists, juniors, as you were in the beginning, as you just shared. You thought it's your job to fix them. Yeah. And I think there might be also facilitators who then take responsibility or feel bad because the ideas that came up were not breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. I was me. I mean, again, I was going through this kind of double track of just having my mind exploded with massage therapy theory and then workshops. And I was kind of fresh in both. And I do remember one workshop early on where I had high hopes for this group. I mean, the interviews before, everybody was thinking big, thinking strategic. And for whatever reason, they got in that room and what they came out with in their plan was what I would call kind of small ball stuff. And I was really disappointed. I didn't share it with anybody, but I walked away and got, I could have taken them further. And then I talked to my client and she said, Michael, this was great. You know, we're so invested. My board is so invested in where we're headed right now, which gets back to the point you made earlier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, it's liberating. It's that particular aha is a liberating thing because I get to focus on what I do well. They can focus on what they do well, and we can play well together. Yeah.
And I think by letting go of this high expectations towards yourself and responsibility, you create a better space for things or self-healing to happen. Because if the massage therapist is so focused on I need to heal, there's also some cramping going on in them. Yes. And if the facilitator has too high expectations or too clear goals of where the group should go, then this energy also spills over to the group and might not allow them to go into the direction that would be best for them.
Yeah, and think about the pronouns, right? The subtle use of the pronouns. It's not about I as a therapist. It's not about I as the facilitator. It's about them, right? It's about them. And yeah, I mean, the body, it's an amazing thing when you're working with a client and you're working on a tight muscle, hypertonic muscle, that you create that environment, you apply a little pressure where you need to, and you can literally feel that muscle just soften up on your hands. It is a magical feeling. And you realize when you feel that it's not you. It's almost like Louis Armstrong, jazz trumpeter from back in the day. He said, New Orleans is an amazing town. He said, all I need to do is put my horn up in the air and it channels the music. And I was like, that's that, right? You are facilitating the transfer of power, energy. In a session like a massage session, and in a facilitation, you're channeling the energy and the ideas of the team. So again, this analogy, I may be taking it to the breaking point, which is the risk of all analogies, is they all break down at some point. But hopefully yes. We haven't completely broken this one. Hopefully this is not off the road yet.
And I just found another layer, and I love analogies, and we'll talk about the meta level of analogies after I shared this one, just to push it a little bit further. Massaging a tight muscle, it hurts. It hurts in the instant, but we know that if we just massage it a little bit more, and we have to go through the pain to then be fully released and feel newborn.
That's awesome. Yes.
And the same is true in a workshop, right?
So because a lot of times the real conversations are painful conversations.
Exactly. And if we're just working around it, it might feel good in the instance, but it feels frustrating afterwards because we know that we didn't hit the actual pain point that could then release the pain sustainably.
And if you don't, it's probably coming back, right? Yeah. I mean, again, once more, at the risk of taking this to a breaking point, you deal with symptoms, massage, you may spend your whole life getting this painful neck worked on, when really what it is it's something in your lower back, right? And we could spend, our life treating our symptoms. And organizations, I think, can also do that if they have not uncovered the root cause of what's getting in the way, right? And to me, those discussions are painful often to get to the root cause. They're challenging to get to, and it can be personally challenging to individuals. But boy, you address the root cause, and then suddenly it's like wow, we feel so much better now.
Yeah. And what I love about this analogy, and that's why I'm not scared at all to break it, because I think they can even...
Well, most of them I find, I just take them right to the edge of the cliff and then push them off. And they're like, okay, back off a step. But yeah, hey, let's keep pushing.
I had an entire hour conversation about the analogy between a DJ and a facilitator. So I love these things. And I think it's where I find value, and I would be curious about your point of view, is that it's so relatable.
Mm-hmm.
I think almost everyone has had a massage in their life. Maybe they haven't been massage therapists, but we've all laid on this table. And I think if I would speak to a client and explain to them that an organization can be like a body, and that we are the therapist to help them identify the pain, to massage it, make it hurt, and then release it, it would also increase their understanding. So it brings it to a very personal, experiential level.
Yes. I think that is, in my mind, that is the power of analogies, right? I mean, because it gives people an opportunity to have their own connection with whatever we're talking about. And even I could say, wow, strategy sessions are like running a class 6 rapid, and people may not have run a class 6 rapid, but you explain it and they're like, yeah, I see that. And just as we've just done for the last 10 minutes, a great analogy kind of offers up the opportunity to dive a little deeper and deeper. And to me, the more of those connections, the richer the thing you're trying to talk about, a strategy session, the richer it becomes, right? And I do think that it also helps if there's a little bit of a surprise. Like what? It's like, what? Yeah. And the neuroscience around this is really pretty powerful. When you read what happens in the brain, we land an idea as facilitators, and it sticks in there are neural connections that are made. And the neuroscience says that the more other connections an individual can make to the same idea, literally, the more the neural connections are there, and it makes it stickier, right? Yeah. And the concept sticks longer and deeper. And so I find for participants in particular, to be able to sprinkle analogies throughout a session can really, really help, because they're processing this on the level that we've given it and the level that they're experiencing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and connecting it to a different layer, which is more personal to different experiences, and then the likelihood of them remembering it will be higher.
And they don't remember it just in their head, right? I mean, because if you've tied to something experiential, then there's a whole different set of connections, because, relying on what you learned a month ago versus what you experienced a month ago, very different recall.
Absolutely. And also what I think is that through an analogy, you can take some heaviness off certain concepts or words or topics.
Yeah.
It might be easier to talk about a muscle that is stiff than...
in the finance department.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when Joe from finance is in the room. Yes. I love that. Yeah, it gives you a way to make it more personal and less personal
at the same time.
Yeah, I knew I was going to enjoy chatting with you. Thank you.
So, and now I'm curious, how do you usually use then analogies in your facilitation practice?
Well, I generally tend to process the world that way myself. Right. I just make connections with things. I don't know why. It's maybe a function of miswiring. I don't know. But I make connections. And so I tend to use them. And I use them from my own life. We've talked a little about massage. I mean, I'm a very avid photographer. Mm-hmm. And I used to be a whitewater kayaker. And so, for instance, in photography, when we'll get to a point where I'm suggesting that they look at things a different way, I may say, I learned something in photography that may be helpful here. And what I learned in photography is that you cannot see what you don't focus on. And then I give them a little experiment. I said, look out to the horizon or look to the end of the wall. And I said, take your finger and move it like across your eyes, just 2 or 3 inches away from your face. And I said, you can see kind of a fuzzy shape, but if you're looking at the horizon line, all you see is some blob. But if you focus on it, you can see it in detail. And so I said, why don't we now focus on this information that you have that you may not have even seen before. Let's look at trends. Let's look at themes. Let's look at what you've got. Can you dissect? Can you see things that you didn't focus on before? So to me, tools like that just in the moment can really, I think, bring another level of kind of the edge gets a little sharper for them.
And it brings everyone. Absolutely. And I just realized that you catch the attention. It's almost like a priming mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay, I could tell you how important it is to focus now. Okay, guys, it's very nice that we're having all these conversations, but it's time to focus. 1, 2, 3, have a break, and then we focus. And then how many will actually focus, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like blah, 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 blah. It's like Charlie Brown, Charlie Brown Christmas, wah, 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 which often happens, right, when people feel like they're being talked to or lectured to. Yeah, to me, that's like, and I love throwing different examples like massage, because people are like, what? It grabs their attention, right? Yeah. And then they see it. It's like, oh yeah, especially like the little trick with the finger in front of your eyes. It's so fun to watch that happen because you can just see they just bring so much more presence right now.
And it changes the energy immediately because, again, people become more present. It becomes personal, and at the same time moves them away from whatever happened before.
Yeah. It's a fascinating tool. It really is. It's one of those things. It's almost like your question about how did you know you were, a facilitator, and I was doing it before. And I just, like I said, I know that I just tend to process things that way, kind of laterally thinking about things. And several years ago, as I got involved in the Southeast Association of Facilitators, I did a workshop for them on analogies. And so I actually went back and researched what I had been doing. And I realized there was actually a fair amount of science and process around using analogies, and I hadn't really thought of it. So again, I focused my lens like on the science of analogies and like, okay, yeah, I see things I didn't see before.
Which is nice because I can imagine that now it even gives you more permission. So to use analogies and maybe to push them even a little bit further.
Yeah. Towards
the edge, because you know how useful it is.
Yeah, it really does. And honestly, to me, it's more fun, which is not about our fun necessarily, but just, you can bring a little more playful energy to the session, which I think is good if it's not overplayed, right? I mean, but yeah, just kind of mix it up a little bit, I think is helpful. And I also think it does one more thing, at least I hope this is what it does, is I think it humanizes us as facilitators a little bit when we share parts of our life and how it affects this work, this conversation. I don't think that's a bad thing at all for people to walk out of there, obviously with the work product, but also with just a sense of connection. Like we're all just, we're rolling up our sleeves trying to do the best we can. It's not like I don't want to be on a pedestal. I just, I want to be part of a dialogue. And I think that helps.
Yeah. Also we need to lead by example and by opening up and making it a little bit more personal. And again, analogy is a good way to make it personal without going full blown into personal experiences. Yeah. So it's a playful level.
It is.
To share an expertise and insight without overdoing it.
Without overdoing it. Yeah. 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 I hadn't thought about that either. Thank you. I'm taking notes here.
Hey, since you are listening to this podcast, I was wondering whether you get enough opportunities to exchange, practice, and experiment with other facilitators. Have you heard of the Never Done Before Facilitation Festival? It's a 24-hour global event that is co-created by its participants and delivered by some of the most popular Workshops Work podcast guests. Visit neverdonebefore.org for more information. Use the code WORKSHOPSWORK to get a 20% discount. The festival starts as soon as you join. Now, back to the show.
Do you think that they're bad analogies, or how do you know that something is a good analogy and that is worth to be used in the session? And what could be, are there actually bad analogies?
Yeah, I think there could be a lot of bad analogies, actually. There could be some that are just inappropriate for whatever reason for the audience or the topic, and it just doesn't play well. And I actually use one or two of those, what I'm not going to share because I embarrass the heck out of myself. And so there are places you probably don't want to go. I'd say a good analogy probably, again, kind of surprises you. And just like we did with massage, it was really fun to go through that discussion with you because it's like, but wait, there's more, right? And to me, a great analogy is it offers up the possibility of, but wait, there's more. And I think the more you connect what appears to be disparate things or walk around and say, yeah, it really is, I think it just really lights up. You know, people, you just get very invested in what's going on. I also think the more you use analogies, the easier it is.
Because the more you see it.
Yeah, you can probably connect just about anything to just about anything if you don't push it too hard. Yeah. I mean, because like I said, every analogy breaks down. That's just the nature of the beast. But I find trial and error. And I'd also say, like I said, yeah, if you sit with one and people react, and it's more than just a one-sided, like there's multifacets. I guess that's it. A multifaceted analogy where you can see it from a couple different facets, I think is probably an outstanding example.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like a dance. It's if you start with an analogy, you create this new mental model for people to understand and to refer to. Mm-hmm. So, and this will help them also to remember the workshop or the outcome or whatever you're presenting. But then I think if you try to push it too far and then it doesn't make sense anymore,
yes,
then you can easily also lose the group because then it's almost then you're breaking the trust or the respect, the authority.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great insight that analogies work until they don't. When they don't, if we're riding them too hard, too long, then yeah, it just, all the magic goes away. And it's like, well, that's kind of stupid because it's not like that, right? So to set it up, to explore it a little bit, and then to know when to walk away from it's like, okay, we made that point. We're now looking at this deeper because again, I mean, I've said it many times, every analogy breaks down at some point. Yeah.
Has it ever happened to you that a participant would say, no, this doesn't make sense because I'm a massage therapist myself and I can tell you that it's actually totally different?
I haven't had too many massage therapists in my session.
I was just beginning, or I'm a photographer myself. So let me tell you something about focus.
Don't know that I've had anybody push back. I can tell some people get it and some people don't, right? Which is another risk, is if the analogy is too arcane. As my jazz piano instructor used to say, sometimes you can be too hip for the room, right? And so, you want to think about the ones you use. Does it have kind of multifacets? Is it going to be accessible to most of the folks in the room? And then again, to me, it's like I'm not the people that get it, that's great. And if they don't, well, then there'll be another one coming along. I mean, we don't have to have 1,000%. You don't have to bat 1,000 on this one. Yeah. But again, I'd say, the biggest risk is what you said, pushing it too far, because then the whole thing just collapses and you seem silly and you're off your game. And it's like, well,
if you try to outsmart the group. So I think choosing an analogy that is so technical or so expert knowledge that you need more time to explain the analogy, then it totally misses the purpose.
Yeah. In fact, I've mentioned just in passing, like, wow, session design is like running a Class 6 Rapid. And there's probably not many people in my sessions that would run a Class 6 Rapid. It's a really good analogy because I've done both. But then I realized, like, wait a minute, there's a very similar analogy here. Setting a workshop design is really like setting yourself for a par 5 hole in golf. Now, that's a broader audience. The analogy is identical. You can't get from the tee to the hole on a par 5. You got to plan where you're going to go here, and then where you're going to go here. And then, by the way, on this third step, I need to be right in front of the stream so I can get over the sand trap, right? So people think about, when I teach facilitation, I use that analogy a lot because, to get their heads wrapped around, like, how do I plan a workshop? And it's like, God, I don't even know. But a lot of people play golf. I don't. Okay. So I'm borrowing that analogy. But they can go like, yeah, I do that all the time. I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. Now I see. I do. Before we get to like, what's the next steps out of this workshop? There's a whole lot of places we need to land. Right. And so, to me, that analogy, golfing analogy for that works probably a whole lot better than a Class 6 Rapid.
Yeah. And which again underlines how important it is to start with the participant in mind. So what is it that they can relate to? Because if you would then give a training to high school students about facilitation or lower class people who don't have access to golf, then again, it could turn them off by saying, that arrogant dude, what is he trying to tell me about golf?
Oh, this is just like an African safari. You come across as full of yourself and not at all connected to them. So I do think that the choice is very important. And I also think that there's an amazing flexibility in the choices once we start to think about it. I also think this is a skill like anything, running or doing a budget or whatever. The more you do, the easier it gets to do. And so I think, starting off with a couple, trying them out, and then as facilitators, they get a little more confident. If they see the reaction in the room and the impact, that might be a good motivator to just lean in a little more. Yeah.
And are there certain moments where you would use analogies, or would you even build an entire workshop around an analogy?
Oh, wow. I don't know that I've got, like, in this place in my session design, use it. It tends to be, and honestly, in all candor, I don't tend to have them scripted often. It's just kind of in the flow of the moment. It's like, there are some places, like, again, the photo analogy, when we're pivoting to looking at new data. And I don't know that the only time I've built an entire workshop around analogies was, as I mentioned, back in when I first got introduced to Southeast Association of Facilitators, and that was a workshop on analogies. But I think for me, it tends to be more of a supporting character instead of a lead actor in my performances. Yeah.
And then it becomes another tool in our toolbox as facilitators that we can use in order to change dynamics, change focus, or bring forth a certain point.
Yeah. I mean, as I think, I'm thinking more deeply about your question. I guess a good place to use analogies would be when you want people to look at data or synthesize data, right? Synthesize information. If they're bringing things together, then a good analogy could, in fact, kind of prime them for that activity. And maybe on the front end, as they're looking at it, to just give them a way to look at things a little more deeply or a little differently, might be from a process design standpoint. I hadn't really thought about that, but those would be the places that it would probably have a bigger impact.
Yeah. Or at the very beginning to start with an analogy, just to catch their attention, set the tone, prime them, as you say.
Yeah. I love your point about you model, right? I mean, as facilitators, we really we should model the behavior we're looking for. And to me, that whole idea of analogies, it's kind of a little vulnerability, making connections, getting people talking, and making it easy to do that, I think helps.
Yeah. From your experience or point of view, what makes a workshop fail?
There may be a couple of different primary root causes. This is probably not about analogies, but I've certainly seen my share that didn't pop. I'd say on one hand, if I look at myself, often it's a lack of planning, not thinking it through. And I mentioned my former jazz piano instructor. He shared something with me in music that plays here as well. And he said, Michael, you cannot hope to improvise a tune until you know how to play it straight. By playing it straight, it's what are the chord changes? What's the melody? What's the timing? You've got to go through the process of learning how to play a tune straight before you can hope to improvise. And for me, the planning I need to do as a facilitator to get into a session is to know how to play it straight, because I have not been in a session in the last 15 years where there wasn't at some point some level of improv, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to go, if it's going according to plan completely, something's wrong. And so to me, it gives me that flexibility when it goes in a different direction. It's like, all right, I'll riff with this tune for a little bit. And I know where to come back. Like, okay, there's a chord change in 20 minutes. I need to hit that chord change. And so I'd say when I don't do that, when I don't invest that time, that's probably for me, when I'm the root cause of workshops that fail. And then when I think on the participant side, I would say the ones that don't land are usually the ones where people don't have buy-in to why they're there. They don't understand what they're trying to achieve. And mostly they have no skin in the game of what comes out. And then they are prisoners or vacationers, and they're not seekers, right? And to me, that sets up a dynamic where you can call it done, but you rarely consider it a success when you're really, when you're in that conversation with yourself. It's like, that one was a little flat. And again, you can look to root causes at the time. But yeah, that I guess those would be the two things, Miriam. Like, I didn't do enough prep. They're not invested.
Yeah, and I wonder whether even the second one is also related to preparation, actually, but on a different level. Because if you have prisoners or vacationers, I love these terms, in the session, there's something wrong in the preparation. So the wrong people were invited, or they didn't get the memo of why they're there, how they can contribute. Mm-hmm.
They don't have the appropriate level of background information, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't feel like they can go head to head with somebody 3 levels above them in the organization. Or we didn't do enough planning and we put somebody that's brand new at the same breakout with the owner. Yeah. How productive is that breakout going to be for that young person, right? I mean, so yeah, there's a lot of that. I'd say that I rarely blame my participants. I really do. When things don't go well, I first look here, and not to beat myself up, because I'm not taking out a stick and beating myself. I'm just like, what can I learn? Because to me, this work that we do can be, you can bring intention to everything, right? What color Post-it notes back in the day when we were live, what color Post-it notes do I want to use? Right? There can be intention to that level. And usually when it goes flat, yeah, I love your idea, like chain it back. Should have happened that didn't. Yep.
Yeah. And what were our projections?
Yeah, and it gets back to what we said earlier, right? Was I, in my mind's eye, did I have them landing at a place certain, like with the answer? Yeah, so I'd say when they do go, not off the rails, but when, to me, well, you actually, even when they go well, I think it behooves us as facilitators to step out, put the lens on our camera where we look at and focus on the specific elements of our design and execution so we can go right there. When I do it again, I think I'm going to try something different right here. I'm going to give more time or less time, more detail. To me, intentionality is huge, which, by the way, Miriam, it's also, I forgot to say, it's one of the big things in massage. Mm-hmm. Taking you back there is like you go into a session. What's my intention right now? Because, for instance, if you're giving somebody a massage on their back, if you look at the anatomy, there can be 3, 4, 5 layers of muscle, right, stacked on top. And as a therapist, you've got to be really clear that my intention is to work the 3rd layer down, right? And same thing with session design. What's my intention? What's my client's intention? In what are they trying to achieve? What's their purpose? What's the output? What's my intention in the path to get there? So I'd say intentionality is also just crazy important. And I had never really thought about that until I realized that if my intention was off, I was not going to be able to give a good massage because I'd be working on the wrong things or working on the right things the wrong way.
Yeah. Good one. Do you have a favorite analogy?
I don't know. Well, okay. So I don't know if it's a favorite. I do remember early in my whitewater kayaking career, I boated. I was really fortunate to boat with some of the best boaters in the Southeast. One guy in particular, Stephen Ensign, if he's listening, in Richmond, Virginia. This guy, he was just an amazing boater. And I would try to follow him. I mean, I spent years just following this guy down rivers. And he would play and jump and do rodeo tricks. And I'm just getting hammered and swimming. And one day we got to the bottom and I said, Stephen, how are you doing this? I said, I am like right behind you, but you're having fun and I'm swimming. What's going on? And he said, well, like that big rapids up there. What were you focused on? I said, the back of your helmet. He said, no, in the river. I said, well, I was focused on that rock, that undercut rock that you told me could kill me. And he said, Michael, that's the problem. He said, you got to focus on the water, not the rocks. Because if you're gonna move toward what you focus on. And I use that analogy when I taught my stepdaughters how to drive, right? Because you can be distracted. There was a duck crossing sign in our neighborhood. I remember this is now part of the family lore. There was a duck crossing sign. And one day to prove this, my oldest stepdaughter was driving. I said, oh, that's an interesting sign. And she looked up and the car just goes right to the sign. And I was like, okay, slow down. Let's have a little chat. This is a good lesson. You will move toward what you focus on. And to me, the reason I like that analogy is that it applies in so many. I mean, that's a life analogy in my mind. As I'm going through life, day to day, am I focusing on the water, the path through, or am I focusing on the rocks? Right? And I think that's a good one to remember every now and then when it feels like all you see are rocks. It's like, no, there's a path through here and I need to focus on that. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. And it almost seems as if you need life experience to come up with analogies because your bag of situations, experiences just get filled.
Yeah.
And then you will be able to make these connections. I think this might be, do you think it's a talent or is it a muscle?
Both. I think there's a muscle in doing it. There can be a talent in making the analogies and presenting them, right? I mean, there's a little presence involved in that. And it's both. It's without a doubt. I think it's both. Yeah. And to your point, one of the things that I love about facilitation is that it's one of those unique professions that I think you can get better and better the more life experience you've had, right? I'm so grateful that now that, I'm ringed in gray and I'm almost 60, I've found work that, the more gray hair, the better, right? Because I am no longer a whitewater kayaker, right? I mean, I gave that up 20 years ago because that was a younger person's sport. But this work I do, I think the more life experience, whether it's through analogies or whatever, I just think the work we do in facilitation, Yeah.
I totally agree. Because it remains interesting because every group and everything is different, and we learn along the way and can apply our learnings along the way. And also with experience and age, we get more grounded. Mm-hmm. So whatever happens in the room, after a while, okay, we immediately can point out our characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the archetypes. And it's like, okay, yeah, I know that. And you also have been through, how do you deal with those individuals? Yes. Yeah, because boy, sometimes personalities can get a little outsized in a room. And the first time somebody slams a door, and says, this is the stupidest effing thing I've ever done in my life, it can really rattle you.
Yeah.
The second time it happens, it's like, okay, well, that wasn't fun, but I've been there before. And the been there, done that.
Yeah, survive that.
Yeah, I think it's hugely important for this. Now, that said, I am fortunate to know a number of outstanding next-gen facilitators. And by next, I mean, I'm going to be 60 this year. So, folks in their 30s. And, old age and treachery is not a requirement for this work. I'm just saying it helps. Mm-hmm. And then when you're dealing with folks who are just on their game, it's like, it's not a requirement. But I find it helps me because, you use the tools you have, right? I mean, that's it. I guess you use the tools you have. And if part of your toolkit is a set of experiences that are out there that you can connect up with, the better. But something else, I guess, Miriam, as I think about the power of analogy for the facilitator, I think if one begins to use the muscle, as to your analogy of using analogies, then you realize that even if you're someplace for the first time doing something you've never done before, you've done other things that you can connect with, right? So you almost have a default blueprint. May not be perfect, right? But I mean, as an initial path through, and also something to fall back on if you're in the middle of that thing and it's gone off. Like, it's like, okay, what do I know about myself or what I've done where I might make this happen? And it's often, for me, it's often not in the session itself, right? It's like, oh yeah, let me eddy out here, right? And just catch my breath or whatever the case may be.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think it's brilliant to this blueprint of thinking, okay, this new situation, what is a similar situation or what is the analogy for that? Mm-hmm. And using that to prepare, although it requires, I think, quite a high level of abstraction and also ability to zone out. Mm-hmm. Because often when we are in a situation, especially when it's challenging or when we're scared, our brain is not very good in zoning out and
we get very
taking distance.
Right? Yeah, it's the equivalent of the of the lion. I'm being attacked by a lion. You don't look around at where the Dairy Queen is. It's just the lion.
We focus on the rocks because they might kill us, right?
Because they might kill us, right? And and I think to your point, the muscle memory of just using analogies, just day to day, I think will in the moment, I think it makes an easier connection to go, wait a minute, oh, this is similar to what I've done before. Yeah, I can handle this. Mm-hmm.
Can become a very nice mantra as well to train the muscle then of doing stuff we haven't done before, which I think is very important, especially in the world of a facilitator.
Well, and then just think, if you do it once, you can use it as an analogy.
Yeah. True.
It's another tool in your toolkit.
Yeah. I think just realizing that we are asking the participants so often to get out of their comfort zone. And I think to keep the empathy for that, we need also to push ourselves out of the comfort zone from time to time.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite exercise?
Let's see. Facilitation exercise. Again, probably not at an analogy level, but I'd say if the one that feels magical to me every time I do it is what I'd call a clump and dump, or dump and clump, or affinity grouping is a little kind of more less obscure. And when I do strategy workshops, they've done the mission, the vision, the top level. And then I've found that when I'm building the rest of the strategy, focus areas, objectives, and everything, I build them from the bottom up instead of the top down. Mm-hmm. And there's a real difference of opinion in our world, right? Our facilitator, about what the best way to do that. But what I find is through affinity grouping, you get a bunch of ideas, brainstorming ideas out there, and then you just start to put them into like buckets, right? And to me, that is magical, because the process of affinity grouping now begins to inform, what's this bucket called? Oh, that's stakeholder engagement, and you start to get kind of meta views that's based on the specific things they think need to be done. Because I find people can work really well at what's the task we need to do. That's an easier task. Categorization, though, I find for a lot of people is a little more challenging. It's a little more abstract. And this affinity grouping really just comes together. And I love to do it because you just see it is such a creative process, and you see that take shape. And when you watch participants see it take shape too, you can just tell there's wow, we're doing something here.
And I think, as you said, the real magic happens the moment where you ask the group to put a label on the bucket.
Yeah.
Because this really reveals, while we can live in the illusion that we all agree, okay, these all fit together, but there might be different perspectives at play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people go like, hey, I think it should be this. I think it should be that. And then in that conversation about what they should call this bucket, really clarifies the thinking in the room, doesn't it?
Yeah, it forces the group to really align, to make sure, okay, do we understand the same things by the words we're using?
Yeah. So, it's a tried and true tool in our toolkit. I wish I had a more innovative one to share, but I like that one just because I like the impact that it has on the work product primarily, but also the conversation in the room. It just, people can feel, and a lot of people don't give themselves credit for the creativity that they have, right? Yeah. I think people walk away, I'm not creative. And to me, that is an insanely creative team process.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I agree that I think it's good that you're mentioning such a basic exercise. It's a basic toolkit.
Yeah.
That sometimes we tend to forget that there's a good reason why we have these basic things that are so simple but so powerful.
Yeah.
And very often we don't need to get any fancier than that.
Yep. Yeah. Few people rarely go, look at my new open-end wrench, but you use it a lot, right? Sorry, I used another analogy. I'm sorry. But yeah.
That's what you're here for.
That's what I'm here for.
Wonderful. If someone fell asleep after minute 2, just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to the entire show, what would you like them to walk away with?
Recognize the power of analogies for yourself and for the participants in your workshop. Don't be afraid to use them. Some will work, some won't. Some will break down after a while. But by using them and figuring out which ones work and how far you can push the ones you use, I do think what it does is it creates a really phenomenal opportunity to connect with your audience or your participants in a different way and have them connect with the content in a different way. And to me, connections at both of those levels, Miriam, are so much about what we should be doing. So I would suggest, again, as a tool, consider this a tool and try it if you don't already use it. My sense is you'll find with just a little bit of practice that it can become one of your go-to tools.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think pleasure. The way how you use the analogies is very inspiring to just, what have you done before facilitation, and use that as a starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, and you really, truly can. It may fall apart after just 1 or 2 layers, but it's fun to just make analogies, just crazy stuff. Like you wouldn't think, I don't know, the rubber ducky in the pool is like, just to see, just to play with it. I think analogies also bring kind of a playfulness that also I think is really helpful for us as facilitators to, hold it seriously, but gently and have some fun. Because if we're having some fun and engaging with the material that way, I think our participants, you, to your point earlier, we're modeling how the participants can engage with us and the material as well, and each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time.
It really has been a pleasure. I have had the opportunity to chat with a couple of folks that have you've interviewed before, and they all just raved about you and this process, and now I know why. And I am now an official member of your fan club. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was great. Thanks again.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.